Welcome to Story Tales. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more incredible stories. Grab your favorite snack, get comfy, and let's dive into today's tale. It's one you won't forget. The quiet hum of the coffee maker filled the kitchen as David stared out the window at his backyard. The year was 2018, and the suburbs of Richmond, Virginia, had never seemed more still. The towering oak tree in the yard swayed gently in the autumn breeze, its golden leaves a stark contrast to the dark storm brewing inside David's mind. David, 35, was the quintessential family man. Tall, with a strong jawline and dark brown hair that always seemed slightly tousled. He had an easy charm about him. He worked as a project manager at a tech firm downtown, a job that provided a comfortable life for his family. His wife, Jenna, was the artistic one. With her fiery red hair and an infectious laugh, she had a magnetic presence. She ran a small but thriving interior design business, which she often referred to as her third child, after their two daughters, Lily, 7, and Emma, 4. To the outside world, the Prescott family was picture-perfect. They had a beautiful house, 2 adorable kids, and a marriage that seemed solid. But inside, cracks were forming, small at first, almost imperceptible, but growing with each passing day. It all started a few months back, when Jenna's schedule became unusually packed. Late-night design consultations, weekend trips to scout for materials, and sudden client emergencies became the norm. At first, David didn't think much of it. Jenna was passionate about her work, and he admired her drive. But then there were the missed dinners, the hurried goodbyes, and the increasing amount of time she spent on her phone, smiling at messages she never shared. David shook off the thought as the coffee machine beeped. "Morning?" Jenna's voice floated into the kitchen as she entered, her hair pulled back into a messy bun. She looked radiant, as always, but there was a distance in her eyes that David couldn't ignore. "Morning," he replied, handing her a mug. "You were up late again." "Another client emergency." Jenna took a sip, avoiding his gaze. "Yeah, something like that. Big project coming up. You know how it is." David nodded but said nothing. He did know how it was, or at least how it used to be. Jenna had always shared every detail of her work with him, from color palettes to client quirks. But now, it was as if she were living a separate life, one she didn't want him to be part of. As the weeks passed, David's unease grew. Jenna's late nights became more frequent, and she seemed more distracted than ever. One evening, while cleaning up after dinner, he noticed her phone buzzing on the counter. A message preview flashed on the screen. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow. M." David's stomach dropped. He glanced at Jenna, who was in the living room with the girls, helping Emma with her puzzles. His mind raced. Who was M? A client? A friend? Or something else? He didn't confront her that night. Instead, he told himself there had to be a reasonable explanation. Jenna had never given him a reason to doubt her before. But the seed of suspicion had been planted, and it was growing fast. The turning point came on a rainy Saturday in November. Jenna had left early, claiming she needed to meet a client across town. David was home with the girls, who were engrossed in a Disney movie marathon. He tried to focus on the sounds of their laughter, but his thoughts kept drifting back to that mysterious text. That's when he decided to check their shared iPad. Jenna often used it for work, and he hoped he might find something. Anything that could put his mind at ease. But what he found did the exact opposite. A series of messages between Jenna and a contact named M popped up in the iMessage app. David's hands trembled as he scrolled through the conversation. It was undeniable. M wasn't a client or a friend. M was Mark, a colleague from Jenna's interior design circle. The messages were flirty, intimate, and filled with plans to meet in secret. One message, in particular, made David's chest tighten. "I wish I could be with you all the time. Being around David feels so suffocating." The words hit him like a punch to the gut. Suffocating? Was that how Jenna felt about their marriage? About him? David's first instinct was to confront her the moment she walked through the door, but he knew he needed to keep his cool. Instead, he decided to gather more information. He hated himself for snooping, but he had to know the truth. He started paying closer attention to Jenna's behavior, her body language, her excuses, and even her phone habits. The following week, David decided to follow Jenna during one of her so-called client meetings. He felt like a character in one of those crime dramas he used to binge-watch, tailing her car from a safe distance as she drove downtown. He hated what he was doing but couldn't stop himself. Jenna parked outside a boutique hotel, a place David had never heard her mention before. His heart pounded as he watched her meet Mark in the lobby. They didn't even try to hide their affection. Mark greeted her with a kiss on the cheek, his hand lingering on her waist. The two of them disappeared into an elevator, leaving David sitting in his car, staring at the hotel's glowing sign through the rain-soaked windshield. That night, David barely slept. His mind replayed the scene over and over, each detail cutting deeper than the last. By morning, he knew he couldn't keep this to himself anymore. He needed advice, someone to help him figure out what to do next. He called his best friend, Eric, who lived a few streets over. Eric was blunt, sometimes brutally so, but he was also loyal to a fault. If anyone could help David navigate this mess, it was him. "Man, you need to confront her," Eric said after David finished recounting everything. "This isn't something you can sweep under the rug." "What if she denies it?" David asked, his voice shaking. "What if I'm wrong?" Eric sighed. "You're not wrong, David. You've seen the messages. You've seen them together. She's cheating. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" Stay tuned as the story unfolds. How will David confront Jenna, and what will her reaction be? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Story Tales for the next part of this gripping tale. Let us know in the comments, what would you do if you were in David's shoes? Welcome back to Story Tales. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment with your thoughts. Now, let's dive back in and see how David handles the storm brewing in his life. The next morning, David sat at the kitchen table, sipping his coffee and staring blankly at the screen of his laptop. Jenna breezed into the room, humming a tune as she grabbed her phone from the counter. She seemed so carefree, so oblivious to the turmoil tearing David apart inside. "Busy day today?" he asked, trying to keep his tone neutral. "Yeah," she replied, barely looking up. "Another consultation this afternoon. I might be late, so don't wait up for dinner." David nodded, his mind screaming with questions he couldn't yet bring himself to ask. Instead, he decided to bide his time. If Jenna was going to lie to his face, he needed to be ready for whatever came next. Later that day, David made a call to a private investigator. His friend Eric had suggested it, insisting that David needed concrete evidence before confronting Jenna. "You're already halfway there," Eric had said. "This will just seal the deal." Over the next few days, David tried to act as normal as possible. He played with the kids, cooked dinner, and even asked Jenna about her work. But every time she gave him a vague answer or mentioned another meeting, his suspicions deepened. The investigator, meanwhile, worked quickly, and within a week, David had a folder filled with photos, timestamps, and detailed reports. The evidence was undeniable. Jenna had been seeing Mark for months, sneaking away during the day and even lying about overnight trips. One photo, in particular, made David's blood boil. Jenna and Mark holding hands at a park where he had taken their daughters countless times. It was a betrayal that cut deeper than he ever thought possible. One evening, David decided he couldn't wait any longer. Jenna had just put the girls to bed and was scrolling through her phone on the couch. David took a deep breath and sat down across from her. "We need to talk," he said, his voice steady but firm. Jenna looked up, startled. "About what?" David reached for the folder on the coffee table and slid it toward her. "About this." Her face drained of color as she opened the folder, flipping through the photos and reports. For a moment, the room was silent, save for the sound of the pages turning. Then, Jenna looked up, her eyes wide with panic. "David, I can explain." "Explain what?" he interrupted, his voice rising. "That you've been lying to me? That you've been sneaking around with Mark while I've been here taking care of our family?" Tears welled up in Jenna's eyes, but David didn't feel an ounce of sympathy. I trusted you, Jenna. I thought we had a good life, a happy family. Was it all just a lie? No, she said quickly, her voice trembling. It wasn't a lie. I don't know, David. I felt trapped, like I couldn't breathe. Mark. He made me feel alive again. David stood up, pacing the room. Alive? You felt alive by betraying me? By destroying everything we built together? He turned to face her, his expression hardened. Do you even realize what you've done? To me? To the kids? Jenna sobbed, covering her face with her hands. I didn't mean for it to happen. I didn't want to hurt you. Well, congratulations, David said bitterly. You did. Over the next few days, the house was tense and silent. Jenna moved into the guest room while David tried to figure out his next steps. He couldn't look at her without feeling a wave of anger and heartbreak. At the same time, he couldn't bear to see the pain in their daughter's eyes as they sensed the tension between their parents. One night, David confided in Eric again. I don't know what to do, he admitted. Part of me wants to kick her out and never look back. But then I think about the girls. How do I explain this to them? Eric sighed. It's not easy, man. But you have to think about what's best for you and your kids. Staying together for their sake isn't worth it if it means living in misery. David nodded, though the thought of splitting up his family made his stomach churn. He knew Eric was right, but the decision felt impossible. Meanwhile, Jenna tried to make amends. She apologized repeatedly, offering to go to counseling and promising to end things with Mark. I want to fix this, she told David one evening. I want to be a better wife, a better mother. But David wasn't ready to forgive her. Not yet, and maybe not ever. You don't just get to say sorry and make everything go away, he said coldly. You broke my trust, Jenna. I don't know if I can ever get that back. As the days turned into weeks, David found himself at a crossroads. Should he give Jenna a second chance for the sake of their family? Or should he walk away and start over, no matter how difficult it might be? Stay tuned to find out what decision David makes and how it changes the course of his life. Don't forget to like this video, leave a comment, and subscribe to Story Tales for more incredible stories. What would you do in David's situation? Let us know below. If you haven't already, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and let us know your thoughts in the comments. Now, let's pick up where we left off and get into the rising tension that's about to explode in David's life. The weeks that followed Jenna's confession were a whirlwind of emotions for David. His days blurred together, filled with work, managing the kids, and avoiding Jenna whenever possible. But the nights were the worst. Lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, David replayed every moment of their relationship, wondering where things had gone so wrong. One evening, as David sat alone in the living room, his phone buzzed. It was Eric. Hey man, Eric said. I hate to bring this up, but I thought you should know. Mark's been bragging about Jenna at the bar. David clenched his jaw. What's he saying? Just that he doesn't think you'll do anything. He's convinced Jenna's going to leave you and move in with him. David's grip tightened on the phone. The audacity of it all sent a surge of anger coursing through him. Thanks for letting me know, he muttered before hanging up. That night, David made a decision. He wasn't going to sit around while Mark flaunted his betrayal. It was time to confront him face to face. The next day, David drove to the office where Mark worked. As he entered the sleek, modern building, his heart pounded in his chest. He wasn't sure exactly what he planned to say, but he knew he couldn't leave without making his feelings clear. When Mark spotted David in the lobby, his smug smile faltered. David, this is unexpected. David wasted no time. We need to talk. Now. Mark led him to a quiet corner, away from prying eyes. Look, Mark began, raising his hands defensively. I get that you're upset. Upset doesn't even begin to cover it, David snapped. You had no right to come into my life and destroy my family. Mark chuckled, but it was a nervous sound. Jenna came to me. It's not like I forced her. David stepped closer, his voice dangerously low. You think this is funny? You think breaking up a family is something to brag about? Mark's cocky demeanor wavered, but he recovered quickly. Jenna's not happy with you, David. That's not my fault. David's fists clenched at his sides. He wanted to hit Mark, to knock the smugness off his face. But he knew that wouldn't solve anything. Instead, he took a deep breath and stepped back. You might think you've won, but let me tell you something, David said, his voice steady. This isn't over. You don't get to walk away from this without consequences. Back at home, Jenna was waiting for David. She could tell something had changed. Where were you? She asked, her voice tentative. I went to see Mark, David said, dropping his keys on the counter. Jenna's eyes widened. David, why would you do that? Why wouldn't I? He shot back. You've been lying to me for months, sneaking around with him. Did you really think I'd just let it go? Tears filled Jenna's eyes. I told you I'm sorry. I ended things with him. I'm trying to fix this. David laughed bitterly. Fix this? You can't even fix yourself, Jenna. How am I supposed to believe anything you say? Their argument escalated, voices echoing through the house. Finally, Jenna stormed out of the room, leaving David alone with his thoughts. He stared at the family photo on the wall, the smiles now feeling like a cruel joke. As the days passed, David began to notice a shift in Jenna's behavior. She was more attentive to the kids, cooking their favorite meals and helping with homework. She even suggested counseling again, though David remained skeptical. One evening, as they sat across from each other at the kitchen table, Jenna spoke up. David, I know I've hurt you, and I know it's going to take time to rebuild trust, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes. David studied her face, searching for sincerity. He wanted to believe her, but the wounds were still fresh. It's not just about rebuilding trust, he said quietly. It's about figuring out if we even have anything left to save. Meanwhile, Mark's behavior became increasingly erratic. He began showing up at places Jenna frequented, texting her constantly despite her attempts to block him. One day, Jenna received a package at the house. Inside was a framed photo of her and Mark, taken during one of their secret meetings. David found her holding the photo, her hands trembling. What's this? He demanded. It's from Mark, Jenna whispered. I don't know what he's trying to do. David's anger flared. He's trying to manipulate you, to keep you under his control. Jenna's voice cracked.
I'm scared, David.
I don't know how to make him stop. For the first time in weeks, David felt a flicker of protectiveness toward Jenna. Despite everything, she was still the mother of his children. He couldn't stand by and let Mark terrorize her. David contacted the private investigator again, this time asking for help gathering evidence against Mark. The investigator uncovered a pattern of harassment, from threatening texts to unwanted visits. Armed with this information, David filed a restraining order. When Mark was served with the papers, his reaction was explosive. He showed up at David and Jenna's house, pounding on the door and shouting obscenities. David called the police, and Mark was arrested for violating the order. As the squad car pulled away, Jenna broke down in tears. Thank you, she whispered to David, for protecting me. David nodded, but his expression remained stoic. He wasn't doing this for her. He was doing it for the family they had once been, and for the possibility that they could find a way forward. But could they? The tension between David and Jenna remained, even as they tried to put the pieces of their life back together. Counseling sessions were a mix of progress and setbacks. Some days it felt like they were making headway. Other days it felt like they were just going through the motions. One evening, during a particularly heated session, Jenna admitted something that shook David to his core. I didn't just feel trapped, she said. I felt invisible, like I didn't matter to you anymore. David stared at her, stunned. How can you say that? Everything I did was for this family. For you. Jenna shook her head. You were so focused on being a provider, on being strong, that you forgot how to let me in. And I was too afraid to tell you. The words hung heavy in the air, forcing David to confront his own role in their crumbling marriage. Had he been so focused on holding everything together that he'd pushed Jenna away without realizing it? The climax of their story was approaching, and the choices they made in the coming days would determine the fate of their family. Would David find it in his heart to forgive Jenna? Would Jenna prove that she was truly committed to change? And what would become of their children, caught in the crossfire of their parents' turmoil? Stay tuned as we delve into the heart-pounding conclusion of David and Jenna's journey. If you're invested in this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Story Tales. Your support helps us bring you more captivating stories every week. Today, the tension in David and Jenna's life has hit a boiling point, and everything is building toward a climax you won't want to miss. If you haven't already, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Now let's continue. The days following Mark's arrest were quieter but far from peaceful. The restraining order had created a buffer, but its weight lingered heavily over the household. Mark might have been physically barred from their lives, but the emotional scars he left behind remained fresh. David threw himself into work, using his job as a refuge. But even in the midst of meetings and deadlines, his mind often wandered back to Jenna. Her tearful apologies, the counseling sessions, and the late-night arguments replayed in his head like a broken record. Jenna, meanwhile, was making a visible effort to rebuild trust. She picked up extra chores, volunteered at the kids' school events, and even began planning family outings. But to David, her actions often felt more like overcompensation than genuine change. He struggled to reconcile the woman before him with the one who had betrayed him. One evening, David received a call from his lawyer. "We've secured a court date to finalize the restraining order," the lawyer explained. "Mark's legal team might try to fight it, but with the evidence we have, the outcome should be in your favor." David thanked the lawyer and hung up. When he told Jenna about the court date, her face paled. "What if he tries something?" she asked, her voice trembling. "He won't," David said firmly. "We have the law on our side." But despite his reassurances, the thought of facing Mark again filled David with unease. This wasn't just about the restraining order. It was about drawing a definitive line in the sand. A line that, once crossed, would solidify the end of one chapter and the uncertain beginning of another. The court date arrived, and the tension was palpable. David and Jenna sat in the waiting area, their hands clasped together, an unspoken truce in the face of a shared enemy. When Mark entered the room, flanked by his lawyer, David felt a surge of anger. Mark's smug expression was gone, replaced by a hardened glare. The proceedings were straightforward, but the emotions in the room were anything but. David presented the evidence of Mark's harassment: the texts, the package, and the incident at their home. Mark's lawyer attempted to downplay his actions, arguing that he was simply trying to maintain contact with Jenna out of concern for her well-being. Jenna took the stand, her voice steady but her hands shaking. She recounted the ways Mark had manipulated and intimidated her, painting a picture of a man who couldn't take no for an answer. By the time she finished, the courtroom was silent. In the end, the judge ruled in David and Jenna's favor. The restraining order was upheld, and Mark was ordered to attend counseling and stay away from the family indefinitely. As they left the courthouse, Jenna turned to David. "Thank you," she said softly, "for standing by me through this." David nodded but didn't respond. He wasn't sure if he was standing by Jenna or simply standing up for what he believed was right. The line between the two had become increasingly blurred. But the courtroom victory didn't mark the end of their struggles. If anything, it magnified the cracks in their relationship. The counseling sessions grew more intense, with the therapist urging them to confront their deepest fears and resentments. One night, during a particularly heated session, David finally let his guard down. "You want to know why I've been so distant?" he said, his voice breaking. "It's because I don't know if I'll ever be able to look at you and not see what you did. I don't know if I'll ever be able to trust you again." Jenna's eyes filled with tears. "I know I hurt you, David, and I hate myself for it, but I'm trying. Can't you see that?" David shook his head. "Trying isn't enough, Jenna. I need to know why you did it. I need to know if this was about more than just feeling invisible." Jenna hesitated, as if weighing her words carefully. "It wasn't just about feeling invisible," she admitted. It was about feeling powerless. Like my entire life revolved around being a wife and a mother, and I didn't know who I was outside of that. Mark. He made me feel seen. The admission hit David like a punch to the gut. He wanted to lash out, to tell her that her selfishness had nearly destroyed their family. But instead, he took a deep breath and said, "If you didn't know who you were, you should have come to me." Not him. Jenna nodded, her tears spilling over. "You're right. I should have. And I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make up for that." The turning point came during a weekend trip to the mountains. A last-ditch effort to reconnect as a family. The air was crisp, and the leaves were beginning to turn, painting the landscape in shades of red and gold. For the first time in months, David felt a flicker of hope. They hiked, cooked meals together, and shared stories around the campfire. The kids laughed and played, their joy a reminder of what was at stake. And while David and Jenna still avoided certain topics, there was a sense of unity that hadn't been there before. On the final night of the trip, Jenna handed David a letter. "I wrote this for you," she said, "when I was at my lowest. I never planned to give it to you, but I think you deserve to know." David took the letter and read it in silence. It was raw, filled with regret and self-loathing, but also with love. In it, Jenna admitted that she had been lost, consumed by insecurities she didn't know how to articulate. She wrote about her desire to rebuild their marriage, not out of obligation, but because she truly believed they could find their way back to each other. When he finished reading, David looked up at Jenna. For the first time in months, he saw her. Not the woman who had betrayed him, but the woman he had fallen in love with all those years ago. The trip marked a turning point, but it wasn't a magical fix. Rebuilding their relationship was a slow, painful process, filled with setbacks and small victories. But as the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, David began to see a glimmer of something he thought he had lost forever: hope. In the last section, tensions were rising as David struggled with Jenna's betrayal, while Mark's manipulative presence continued to cast a long shadow over their lives. Now, we're heading toward the pivotal moments that will shape their story's outcome. Make sure to like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more gripping recaps. The weekend in the mountains had given David a renewed sense of purpose, but it also left him with a lingering question. Could he ever truly forgive Jenna? That question haunted him as they returned to their daily lives, the temporary escape fading into a harsh reality. Jenna, too, was grappling with her emotions. She had poured her heart into the letter she gave David, but his response, or lack thereof, had left her uncertain. He hadn't said much after reading it, only that he needed time to process everything. And so, she waited, unsure if her efforts to make amends were bringing them closer together or simply delaying the inevitable. One evening, David found himself in the study, staring at the envelope containing the finalized restraining order against Mark. Felt like both a victory and a burden. Mark was officially out of their lives, but the damage he had caused lingered. As David set the envelope down, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You think a piece of paper can stop me? You're not as smart as you think, David." David's blood ran cold. Mark was violating the restraining order without hesitation, and the casual tone of the message only fueled David's anger. He immediately forwarded the text to his lawyer and called the police to file a report. But as he hung up, he realized something else. Mark wasn't done. Not by a long shot. That night, David didn't tell Jenna about the message. He wanted to shield her from the stress, but his silence only created more tension between them. Jenna noticed his distant demeanor and confronted him. "David, what's going on?" she asked, her voice tinged with worry. "You've been quiet ever since we got back from the mountains." "I'm fine," he replied curtly, avoiding her gaze. "No, you're not," Jenna pressed. "Is it about me? About us?" David sighed and finally looked at her. "It's not just about us, Jenna. Mark sent me a message. He's not going to stop." Jenna's face paled. "What did he say?" "Nothing explicit. Just a warning," David said. "But I've already reported it to the police." Jenna nodded, but the fear in her eyes was unmistakable. "What if he tries to hurt us, David?" What if he? He won't, David interrupted firmly. I'll make sure of it. As the days passed, David and Jenna tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy. But the tension between them was palpable, and it wasn't long before it boiled over. During a heated argument about trust, David finally let his frustration spill out. I'm doing everything I can to protect this family, he said, his voice rising. But sometimes, it feels like I'm the only one fighting. Jenna stared at him, her own anger flaring. That's not fair, David. I've been trying. Trying isn't enough. David snapped. Do you have any idea how hard it is to look at you and not think about what you did? About how you let Mark into our lives? Tears welled up in Jenna's eyes, but she refused to back down. I made a mistake, David. Terrible mistake. But I'm here, aren't I? I'm trying to make things right. David shook his head, his voice quieter now but no less intense. And I'm trying to forgive you, but it's not that simple. The argument ended with David storming out of the house to clear his head. As he walked through the quiet streets of their neighborhood, he couldn't shake the feeling that something had to give. The weight of the past was dragging them down, and unless they found a way to let it go, it would destroy them both. The turning point came one afternoon when Jenna received an unexpected call from Mark's mother. The older woman, who had always been cordial with Jenna, sounded frantic. Jenna, I need to warn you, she said. Mark's been acting unstable. He's angry about the restraining order, and he's been talking about getting revenge. Jenna's heart sank. What do you mean, revenge? What is he planning? I don't know, Mark's mother admitted. But he's obsessed with the idea that you and David ruined his life. Please, be careful. Jenna thanked her and immediately called David, who was at work. David, we need to talk. It's about Mark. David's voice was calm but serious. What happened? His mother called me. She says he's planning something. We need to be on high alert. David's mind raced as he considered the implications. Mark was dangerous, but he was also reckless. If they could anticipate his next move, they might be able to stop him before he caused any real harm. That evening, David and Jenna sat down together and went over their options. They decided to install additional security measures around the house, including cameras and motion sensors. David also contacted the police to report the new information from Mark's mother, hoping it would strengthen their case. But the most significant decision they made was to confront their own fears head-on. They couldn't live in constant fear of Mark or the past. They had to take control of their lives, both as individuals and as a couple. For Jenna, this meant being completely transparent with David about her feelings and actions. She opened up about the deep-seated insecurities that had led her to seek validation from Mark in the first place. For David, it meant acknowledging his own pain and anger without letting it consume him. The tension reached its peak one night when Mark showed up at their home, defying the restraining order. David spotted him on the security cameras and immediately called the police. But instead of waiting for law enforcement to arrive, he decided to confront Mark himself. As David stepped outside, his heart pounded in his chest. Mark was standing near the edge of the driveway, his expression twisted with anger. You've got a lot of nerve showing up here, David said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. Mark sneered. You think you've won? You think a piece of paper can stop me? This isn't about winning, David replied. It's about protecting my family, and I won't let you take that away from me. For a moment it seemed like Mark might lash out, but before he could, the sound of police sirens filled the air. Mark hesitated, then turned and ran, disappearing into the night. The officers arrived moments later, and David provided them with the security footage. As the police assured David that they would apprehend Mark, he felt a sense of relief wash over him. The confrontation had been terrifying, but it had also been empowering. For the first time in months, he felt like he was regaining control of his life. That night, as David and Jenna sat together on the couch, the gravity of what had just happened began to sink in. They were safe for now, but they knew the road ahead would still be challenging. I'm proud of you, Jenna said softly, for standing up to him, for standing up for us. David nodded, his gaze fixed on the flickering light of the security monitor. "I just want this to be over. I want us to move forward. And we will," Jenna said, her voice filled with quiet determination. Together, the intense events of the night marked a pivotal moment in their journey. The confrontation with Mark had tested their resolve, but it had also brought them closer together. For the first time in a long time, they felt like a team again, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Where we're diving into the most intense moments of David and Jenna's story. So far, we've seen how Mark's toxic influence has haunted their lives, and how David and Jenna are trying to rebuild their fractured trust. Now, we're approaching the climactic moments of this story, where everything comes to a head. If you're enjoying this journey, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more recaps that keep you on the edge of your seat. Let's get back to it. The night after Mark's confrontation, the air in the house was heavy with unspoken tension. Jenna tried to distract herself by cleaning the kitchen, her hands scrubbing the same countertop for the third time. David sat at the dining table, his laptop open but untouched. Neither of them spoke, but the weight of what had happened was unmistakable. Finally, Jenna broke the silence. "Do you think they'll catch him?" David glanced up, his expression guarded. "I hope so, but even if they do, that doesn't mean this is over." Jenna nodded, her gaze dropping to the floor. "I hate that he still has this power over us." "He only has as much power as we give him," David said firmly. "We've let him control our lives for too long." The next day, David decided to take matters into his own hands. He reached out to a private investigator, someone who could dig into Mark's whereabouts and uncover anything that could help build a stronger case against him. The investigator, a sharp-witted woman named Elaine, assured David that she would leave no stone unturned. Elaine's confidence was reassuring, but David knew this wasn't a guaranteed solution. Mark was unpredictable, and his obsession with Jenna made him even more dangerous. Meanwhile, Jenna threw herself into therapy, determined to confront her own mistakes and vulnerabilities. Her sessions were emotionally draining, but they also gave her a sense of clarity. She began to understand the patterns of behavior that had led her to seek validation from someone like Mark, and she vowed never to let herself fall into those traps again. While David and Jenna worked separately to regain control of their lives, Mark was still lurking in the shadows. His erratic behavior had escalated, and his obsession with Jenna had reached new heights. He began sending cryptic letters to their home, each one more unsettling than the last. One letter stood out in particular. It wasn't handwritten like the others. Instead, it was a typed manifesto, outlining every perceived slight and betrayal he believed David and Jenna had inflicted on him. The letter ended with a chilling line. "If I can't have her, no one will." David's stomach dropped as he read those words. He immediately called the police, who took the letter as evidence and promised to increase patrols in the neighborhood. But the letter's message stayed with David, a dark cloud that loomed over him no matter how hard he tried to shake it. The tension reached a boiling point when David received a call from Elaine. She had tracked Mark to a rundown motel on the outskirts of town. "He's staying under an alias, but I've confirmed it's him," Elaine said. "He's been paying in cash and keeping a low profile, but he's definitely still in the area." David's first instinct was to confront Mark himself, but he knew that would only escalate the situation. Instead, he worked with Elaine and the police to set a trap. They planned a sting operation to apprehend Mark and put an end to his reign of terror once and for all. The night of the operation was nerve-wracking. David and Jenna stayed home, anxiously awaiting news. Every noise outside the house made them jump. Every ring of the phone sent their hearts racing. It was a feeling of helplessness they both hated, but they knew it was the only way to ensure their safety. Finally, just after midnight, David's phone buzzed with a message from Elaine. They got him. Relief washed over David as he read the words aloud to Jenna. For the first time in months, it felt like they could finally breathe again. But the relief was short-lived. The next morning, David received another call, this time from the police. Mark had been arrested, but during his interrogation, he made a shocking confession. He had an accomplice. The revelation turned their world upside down. Who could possibly be helping Mark? And why? The answers were more shocking than they could have imagined. It turned out that Mark's accomplice was someone from Jenna's past, a former coworker named Lisa. Lisa had always harbored resentment toward Jenna, believing that she had stolen a promotion that rightfully belonged to her. When Mark reached out to Lisa with his plan, she eagerly joined forces with him, seeing it as an opportunity to get revenge. Lisa's role in the scheme had been crucial. She had helped Mark obtain personal information about David and Jenna, including the layout of their home and details about their schedules. She had also been the one to deliver the letters and messages, ensuring that Mark's threats reached their intended targets. The betrayal stung Jenna deeply. She had considered Lisa a friend, or at least an ally, during their time working together. To discover that Lisa had been plotting against her all along was a harsh reminder of how much damage resentment and jealousy could cause. As the police built their case against Mark and Lisa, David and Jenna found themselves grappling with a mix of emotions. Relief that Mark was finally in custody, anger at Lisa's betrayal, and a lingering sense of unease, knowing that the scars from this ordeal wouldn't heal overnight. But through it all, they clung to each other. For the first time in a long time, they felt like partners again, united in their determination to move forward. As the section draws to a close, we're left on the brink of the final resolution. The storm may be passing, but David and Jenna's journey is far from over. Will they be able to rebuild their lives and find peace? Or will the shadows of the past continue to haunt them? Where today we wrap up this whirlwind of betrayal, redemption, and resilience. David and Jenna have been through a roller coaster of emotions and dangers, and it's finally time to see how their story concludes. As always, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories that keep you hooked until the very end. Let's dive into the final chapter. With Mark and Lisa officially in custody, David and Jenna felt a weight lifted off their shoulders. It was a strange sensation, a mix of relief and disbelief. For months, their lives had been consumed by fear and uncertainty. Now, they stood on the precipice of a new beginning, but the journey to reclaim their peace wouldn't be easy. In the days following the arrests, the media caught wind of the story. Mark's obsession and Lisa's betrayal made for a sensational narrative, and reporters camped outside the courthouse for updates. David and Jenna decided to stay out of the public eye, opting instead to focus on healing in the privacy of their own home. One of the first steps in their recovery was addressing the emotional toll the ordeal had taken on their marriage. They resumed couples therapy, but this time the sessions felt different. They weren't just unpacking the pain of the affair or the fallout from Mark's manipulation. They were rediscovering the foundation of their relationship. In one particularly emotional session, Jenna broke down. "I don't know if I'll ever forgive myself for what I did," she admitted, tears streaming down her face. "I hurt you in ways I can't take back." David reached for her hand, his voice steady but full of emotion. "You made mistakes, Jenna. So did I. But we're still here, and that has to mean something. We can't change the past, but we can decide how we move forward." It was a turning point for both of them. They began to see their relationship not as something broken beyond repair, but as something worth fighting for. Meanwhile, the legal proceedings against Mark and Lisa moved swiftly. Thanks to the overwhelming evidence collected by Elaine and the police, both were charged with multiple counts, including harassment, conspiracy, and endangerment. Mark received a lengthy prison sentence, ensuring he would no longer pose a threat. Lisa, while given a lighter sentence due to her cooperation with authorities, was ordered to undergo counseling and pay restitution to the victims. For David and Jenna, seeing justice served brought a sense of closure. But it wasn't just about the legal victory, it was about reclaiming their sense of security and autonomy. As the dust settled, David and Jenna began to rebuild their lives in earnest. Jenna found solace in her art, pouring her emotions into a series of paintings that captured the raw intensity of her journey. Her work resonated deeply with others, and she was invited to showcase her pieces at a local gallery. It was a moment of validation for Jenna, a reminder that she could channel her pain into something meaningful. David, on the other hand, found strength in his role as a mentor. Inspired by Elaine's tenacity, he decided to volunteer at a local organization that supported victims of stalking and harassment. Sharing his story with others not only helped him process his trauma, but also gave him a renewed sense of purpose. Their home, once a place of tension and unease, slowly transformed into a sanctuary. They redecorated together, painting the walls in warm, inviting tones and filling the space with plants and photographs. It became a symbol of their fresh start, a reminder that they had the power to reclaim their happiness. One evening, as they sat on the couch with cups of tea, Jenna looked around the living room and smiled. "It finally feels like home again," she said softly. David nodded, his gaze meeting hers. "Because we made it ours." The most profound change, however, was in their relationship. They no longer avoided difficult conversations or swept their feelings under the rug. Instead, they faced their challenges head-on, knowing that honesty and vulnerability were the keys to their growth. There were still moments of doubt and insecurity. Rebuilding trust was a process, not a destination. But they approached those moments with patience and understanding, supporting each other through the highs and lows. As the months passed, life began to feel normal again. They celebrated small victories, like Jenna selling her first painting or David receiving a heartfelt thank you letter from someone he had mentored. They also started planning for the future, discussing everything from travel destinations to career goals. One sunny afternoon, as they walked hand in hand through the park, Jenna turned to David. "Do you ever think about how far we've come?" "Every day," he replied, his smile genuine. "And I'm proud of us." Jenna squeezed his hand, her heart swelling with gratitude. "Me too." In the final moments of their story, we see a couple who has weathered the storm and emerged stronger on the other side. Their journey wasn't perfect, and it certainly wasn't easy, but it was theirs and they owned every step of it. As the camera fades out, we're left with an image of David and Jenna sitting on a bench, their heads leaning against each other as they watch the sunset. It's a moment of peace, of closure, and of hope for the future. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to like, share, and comment below. And don't forget to subscribe to Story Tales for more incredible recaps that remind us of the power of resilience and redemption. See you next time.